So I'm going to do a little housekeeping before we get started. My name is Jan Rail. I am the DuPage County Program Director. And if you have questions, please use the question and answer box. That will let everyone see your question and make it easier for me to find them all. Questions sometimes can get lost in the chat, but I'll answer them. I'll have Jennifer, let her know that you have a question for her. And then these webinars are offered to the public for free. However, we do encourage you to consider a donation or membership. At the end of the webinar, you will be taken to a page with a bunch of resources for things that may be of interest to you, and including a virtual tip jar. And if you're enjoying these webinars, I encourage you to donate to help us keep running. This will also make you a member so you can enjoy our wide variety of members only stuff. And also we have a campaign right now for that we are trying to match. The Hamill family has a match going right now. So if you donate, whatever you donate, it is matched equally by the Hamill family. And the campaign runs to the end of the year. So I encourage you to donate and help us out. And so also I want to let you know about some upcoming webinars. On the next Wednesday is December 2nd, and it's all about owls. And then the next webinar is December 9th. Crawling, flying, and digging in your yard are six-legged friends. And then the next county webinar, we're taking a break at the end of December, and the next county webinar, sponsored by DuPage County Stormwater Management, is on Wednesday, January 2nd. It's Critters in the Streams of DuPage County, and Jessie DiMartini from the Forest Preserve District of DuPage County. She is the Aquatic Research Center Coordinator, and she will be speaking. So Jennifer will be giving you more information, but this program is sponsored in partnership with DuPage County Stormwater Management. And I'd also like to thank specifically Mary Mitros for helping me coordinate these meetings and working with her. With that, I'm turning the presentation over to Jennifer Hammer. Jennifer is the Director of our Watershed Programs and Ecological Restoration at the Conservation Foundation.
Thank you, Jan. So yeah, we're going to kind of jump right in. Right spot here going. So like Jan said, this webinar, and we actually have one generally the third Wednesday of the month, except for December, that is sponsored by DuPage County Stormwater Management. And we've been working with DuPage County on a whole variety of education and outreach things around water quality and stormwater for many years. So we're excited to continue that through this webinar series. DuPage County Stormwater Management, they've been working on these issues since the late 80s, 1989, when the countywide program was established. They have all kinds of resources on their website, and please reach out to their staff if you have water quality issues in your area or want to find out more about the programs that they have around watershed management, stormwater management, anything around floodplain mapping. Like I said, lots of resources on their website. And then just a couple slides about the Conservation Foundation. So we've been around for quite some time, going back to 1972. And our mission really boils down to we save land and we save rivers. I kind of read the details of our mission statement there, but the work that we do really is to connect people with the land, with our resources, really kind of endear a sense of responsibility and stewardship, and really looking at how protecting and preserving these resources really helps to maintain and improve our quality of life in our communities. We have kind of 4 different areas of focus that really all intertwine with each other. Kind of on land preservation, on working with rivers and streams, environmental education for kids, and then a variety of education, outreach, and advocacy that works and runs kind of through all 3 of these areas. So really kind of bringing together the things that we do on the land affect the things, the health of rivers and streams. So it really is all tied together. We are proudly accredited through the Land Trust Accreditation Commission. It's really basically is a way to look at land trusts and other conservation organizations like ours, and the fact that we meet the national standards of standards and practices for organizations like ours. We work primarily in Northeastern Illinois. We kind of highlighted some counties there. Our core counties are DuPage, Kane, Kendall, and Will. We do a little bit in LaSalle and DeKalb and Grundy County as well. And then we work with partners in our neighboring counties. There's plenty of work to go around, and working with our partners, we can get more done in more places. We're headquartered in Naperville at the McDonald Farm, a little blue star there on the map, just down into Will County. And our map here continues to grow. We continually are adding dots to it for different projects, different lands that we've helped preserve. We hold actually 45 different conservation easements. We just added 2 more. So we've been very excited about that, working with forest preserves and park districts to preserve land. So definitely an area we've been very active in throughout our existence. All right, so now that we got kind of all of that out of the way about kind of how these workshops come to you and the work that we do more broadly, I'm going to really kind of jump into our topic today, which is around salt use and the impacts of salt and the things that we can all do to help minimize and reduce those impacts. I think I'm going to turn my camera off at this point so that maybe it won't be in the way of any of the slides. So one of the things that I wanted to start out with, and I always do start with in these presentations that I do, and whether it's speaking in front of residents, speaking in front of city councils with public works directors, is the fact that we are interested in safety first. The issues around salt use and road salt in particular, for a long time were just not discussed, not addressed because of the idea of safety. We can't not use salt. We can't not treat the streets because we need to maintain public safety. That being said, we've realized through the last, I would say at least 15 years, that there are a lot smarter ways to use salt where we can still maintain the expected levels of safety, but reduce the amount of salt we're putting out on the roads. There are a lot of best management practices that communities, road districts, departments of transportation have been implementing for a number of years, and those practices continue to get better, the equipment gets better, and we have been able to reduce the amount of salt being put on the roads, and still track side by side with tracking accidents or other results or things that happen during the winter, and being able to show that we're not because we've switched to this new practice doesn't mean that we're seeing more accidents or more slip and falls or things like that. So definitely a huge focus of the work that we do. The really exciting thing for me in this topic, and I've been working around the edges of this and really getting much more deeply into it for more than about 15 years, we've been focusing on this and really getting into depth a lot more over the last 5 years, is that the best management practices, the things that we're asking communities to engage in, not only provide benefits to the environment, to maintaining safety, to reducing stresses around infrastructure. We're going to talk about all of these things, but communities are actually saving money by doing these things. And so it really is a win-win. There's just not that many issues out there where we can do the right thing for the environment and save money. So that has definitely been really exciting and has helped open some doors on these conversations. So the issue that we are just using more and more salt. There's a number of studies that are being done continuously, really trying to track this. It is challenging to track the exact amount of salt being applied. A lot of it is tracked by the amount purchased. But we are easily putting down more than 48 billion pounds of salt, which is a lot of salt. And so why is that? One of the biggest reasons is as development has occurred over the last 30 to 50 years, we're building more roads. As more development happens, there are more roads, and more roads means more plowing and more salt going down. And so there's more. The other piece of it, we're going to talk definitely a lot more about this later, is higher expectations. The higher expectation of being able to, drive in the middle of a storm, and that, roads should be clear faster, or all the way to the curb, that they're, bare pavement policies in a lot of places. And those expectations and some of those policies are just really not sustainable when we look at the broader cost around salt. Chloride itself is contaminating our surface water, our rivers, our streams. It's contaminating groundwater, which in many areas, particularly outside of DuPage County, but in many areas across the snowbelt, is the source of drinking water. And there's here in like Kane County, there's been monitoring wells that the Illinois State Water Survey has been monitoring for the last 30 years, and they can track the increases in salt and really relate that back to, as development has moved into those areas, those numbers go up. Even though, okay, let's see, I'm skipping ahead a little here. Chloride just hurts aquatic life. It's straight up, it is injurious to both fish and macroinvertebrates. It's not necessarily at levels that kills them, but it stresses them absolutely, and impacts certain life stages around breeding and young of the year, things like that, different life stages for insects. And so although salt is used in the winter, it causes problems well into the summer, which we'll also talk a little bit more about. And once salt is in the water, it's just really hard and expensive to get out. It doesn't get cleaned up at a wastewater treatment plant. It just settles into detention basins. It's not something that easily goes away. So I mentioned before, it's like the idea of the true cost of salt. So we really can't look at just like how much is it when we buy the bag of salt, or how much your community spends on, the whatever thousands of tons of salt that they purchase every year, and then the cost of paying the driver to put it out. That's like a very small number that we're looking at when you look at the broader impacts of salt, what it does to our infrastructure, our bridge decks, concrete, be it on roads, on curbs, people's driveways, metal surrounding our roads, our bridges, things like that. Chloride definitely shortens the life of any of those structures. So repair costs, replacement costs. Everybody knows what it does to our vehicles. Definitely, they always talk about, when a car has come from the snow belt because of the amount of rust, that they have on them. What it does to the environment, the cost, the dollars, figuring out those dollars of the impacts to fish and macroinvertebrates and vegetation. Those are hard dollars to calculate, but those costs are there. Wastewater treatment plants. So although the treatment plant itself is not responsible for removing chloride, the permit limits that those treatment plants have are based on the quality of the stream they discharge to. And when the stream they discharge to is impaired, that the fish and the bugs, those communities aren't healthy, the permit limits on those treatment plants are more stringent and therefore more expensive. And that, for lack of a better term, trickles back down to you as a resident who is paying those bills. I briefly mentioned vegetation. I mean, we've seen the salt burn along sides of sidewalks, around parking lots, anywhere where snow gets piled up. And once that salt is in the soil, it's very difficult to go through and neutralize, and to be able to get stuff to grow well there again. And then on a I guess more personal note, For those of us that have pets and you're walking your dog during the winter around your neighborhood, and the salt that's on the sidewalks or on the roadway is very damaging to their feet. So there's impacts all around, and those dollars do add up. And there's a really interesting study that was done up in Minnesota that really pulls together those numbers. And if you start adding on, well, what does it cost for those infrastructure repairs? The cost to the environment, cost to just maintenance for vegetation and things like that. So it is definitely, like I said, the dollar amount is much bigger than just what you're paying for the salt itself. So before we get too much further along, I just make sure that everybody kind of understands what we're talking about when we talk about salt or chlorides. Kind of put together all of these different words that are, they all have a lot to, there's similarities between chlorides. So if you say chlorides versus rock salt versus road salt, dry salt, it's pretty much just like your table salt. It's sodium chloride. So the basic rock salt is sodium chloride. When we talk about brine, it's really just mixing water and salt together. And then de-icers in general is just a term for any kind of product that melts ice, which may or may not contain sodium chloride, or it may be a mixture of sodium chloride and other things like magnesium chloride or there's several different de-icing agents that they'll mix together depending on the temperature that you want to be able to melt ice at. There we go. Magnesium chloride, calcium chloride, potassium chloride. So these are different mixtures that operate at different temperatures. And then kind of getting a little bit into the why. Just a second here, we'll get this going. It's just kind of a very short little video about.
It's sometime. Why is salt added to icy roads?
To make ice tasty.
Nah. Salt helps melt the ice and thus clear the roads.
What? But how, dude?
The freezing or melting point of water is about 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit. When temperature drops below the melting point, water molecules bond together to form solid ice. However, when temperature rises above the melting point, the bonds break and the ice melts, forming liquid water. Now, when we add salt or sodium chloride to ice, it lowers the melting point, causing solid ice to melt and form liquid even at temperatures below 0 degrees Celsius. Then, the salt dissociates in the liquid water, forming sodium and chloride ions. These ions make it harder for liquid water molecules to again bond together and form ice. Hence, the melting ice does not refreeze and thus helps clear the roads.
Hold on here. So just a short little chemistry lesson there on how salt works and why it's used. And then one of the things I definitely want to kind of touch on when we're talking about salt and using salt at home is that you really have to be an informed consumer out there. There are no regulations or no label regulations for salt. They don't have to necessarily tell you what's in there. They can say it's a proprietary blend. And the other thing about this is you can see here, this one here claims to be eco, pet friendly, kid friendly, will not harm grass, wood, concrete, metals, or other vegetation. That's just flat out wrong. Chloride, there is chloride. It says it right here when you look up the safety data sheet for this product. It has sodium chloride in it. Chloride impacts vegetation. It harms your pet's feet. So there is nothing about this product that is necessarily environmentally friendly. So you really kind of have to take things with a grain of salt as to what is on these labels, and know that pretty much anything you buy that has chloride in it is going to have an impact. Even right here, the environmental impact of this product has not been fully investigated. but yet in their advertising, they make it sound like there is no environmental impact at all. So definitely as you're out there and you purchase things, know that no matter what you buy, if it has chloride in it, it will have an impact. And that's where, the things we're going to talk about today about using it wisely and sparingly is really, where we need to be. So I'm going to kind of jump into sort of what you can do as a resident. And I have it broken up into kind of two areas of what you can do at home and on your own property, and then what you can do as a commuter out on the roads. So one of the things is really being proactive. Are there areas on your property that you know are problem areas? And maybe these things aren't easy to fix, but kind of having a long-term plan about how water drains across your hardscapes. Can you reroute a gutter from running down your driveway to maybe draining out into the lawn? And that may or may not be possible, but if there are places that we can eliminate those sources of water, because, obviously summertime, this isn't a big issue, but in the wintertime, especially as we're, we seem to fluctuate a lot between kind of very cold weather to, it snows and then it rains and then it snows or it freezes. Areas like this on your driveway can cause some real problems with ice building up. So if there's any way to minimize the amount of water going down your driveway, or like I said, reroute gutters or address some low spots, those things will go a long way in helping to reduce the amount of salt or effort that you will need to put forth in removing ice during the winter. So getting ready, having the right tools for the job. So, there's lots of different types of snow shovels out there, kind of the more traditional type. They have some that have like double handles on them that you can really just sort of push snow versus picking it up and throwing it. There's a number of different types of scrapers out there. They're on a long pole. From some of the input we've had from others and people who've done some trainings for us, finding a scraper actually that has a little bit of flex to the blade seems to be really the product to go with as far as trying to get ice, breaking up ice on stairs or in those spots where water kind of seems to settle. Whether the size, really comes down to the size of your driveway or area that you're clearing, whether or not you're using a snow blower versus a shovel. But having those tools, ready before that first snowstorm, so you're not rushing out to kind of see what's left after everybody else has come through, as the snow is falling. So have the right tools for the job. Always shovel first. It really is a waste of salt to put salt down and then to shovel, because you're just shoveling that salt off of, the driveway or the sidewalk where you need it to work. And clearing as much salt mechanically, be it shovel, be it with your snow blower, is really the way you're going to reduce the amount of ice that you get built up. And if it's at all possible to get out there and be able to shovel or clear that snow before people are walking on it or before you have to drive on it. I know that sounds like a good plan ahead of time, and I'm absolutely guilty of not getting out there myself before somebody has to leave early in the morning, or you're coming home after it's been snowing out there and there's no way to avoid it. But the sooner you can get that up before it really gets packed in, because it's that snowpack that's going to ice up, especially if it gets a little bit warm and then it gets cold again. Or being able to get out there, if it does get a little warmed up and you got that kind of slushy mess out there, to try and get as much of that off before it has the chance to refreeze. Sizing it up, as we say. So, really looking at how much salt do you need? Do you need to salt your entire driveway? Are there areas, I know especially with my driveway at home, it's probably about 110 feet long. In general, there are very few places that we really need to put salt. If we put salt down at all, it's kind of right where we're either right where we're getting out of the cars or leading up closer to the doorway where there's a little bit of a slope. It can get a little bit slippery sometime. But in general, we're not putting salt all the way down the driveway because it's just not necessary. Like we haven't had it. And that may not be the case and where you're at, depending on the slope of your driveway or how much ice you get built up. But to really pay attention to that and make it a conscious decision as to where you're putting salt down. And then to think about how much salt you're putting down. So the sort of, we have these cups available for folks, for communities to hand out. But the idea that this, cup of salt, so it's about a 12-ounce little plastic cup, is enough to spread across about 500 square feet or about 80 feet of sidewalk. So in many residential areas, that 80 feet, that is probably close to about the width of your lot. That small amount of salt is enough to spread across there and get the job done. And really the key is spreading it out evenly. So I've kind of a picture there. We were working on doing some calibration of a spreader. And so we were spreading salt down on actually the floor of a maintenance garage. And so we were able to kind of get some nice pictures of like, this is what nicely scattered salt looks like. There shouldn't be clumps and piles of it. It really should be spread out across the surface as best as you can spread it. So particularly if you have a little bit longer driveway or larger area to work in, looking at, there's a number of different hand spreaders that are available that just help to spread it out more so that you don't have those clumps and piles. Because at the end of the day, once the storm has passed and the sun comes out and the ice is all gone, if you have salt that's still left all over the sidewalk, you've put too much down. And essentially you've really kind of wasted that salt. Some of the other considerations, when you're choosing the salt that you're buying is that if you have straight rock salt, it only works down to pavement temperatures of about 15 degrees. And I shouldn't say it doesn't work below that. It just takes a really long time for the salt to melt through the ice, the colder it gets. And so that's where some of those other blends with like the calcium chloride or magnesium chloride, so those are, included in the blends, and they help the chlorides, or they help the product melt through ice at lower temperatures. So, if we're going in, as we get into winter, and if we really start having, those really consecutive cold, very cold snaps, having some different options about the type of blend that you use, you really want to look at changing things up if we start getting to those really cold temperatures. Then after the storm, let's see. Okay, so I am kind of watching the questions as they come in. And so I think we're going to answer this question here with this slide. So after a storm, if there is excess salt, you absolutely can sweep it up. You probably want to keep it in a separate container from like the bag of salt you started with. So maybe, you have a bucket or something that you can keep it in, especially if it's a little bit damp. You don't want to be getting that extra moisture into your original bag, but sweep it up and you can store it for using for the next storm. Something, we're working with many communities do this in the spring anyway, but we've been trying to track how much salt actually gets picked up in the spring, salt that's left over, after the winter. So communities are really trying to use that as a practice again to reduce the amount of salt that's getting to our streams. But definitely sweeping up your excess salt, getting it off your driveway, off your sidewalks, and reusing it if possible. Let's see, one more click here. So I got one more kind of short video. It's one of the things that, we talk about a lot with salt is that, more salt is not necessarily better. You see, particularly when you're out, at a store or shopping mall or something, the amount of salt that is put down in front of stores, along sidewalks, in those sort of more common areas is an incredibly large amount of salt. And I think people really kind of associate the amount of salt on a sidewalk with being safe. And, just because you're crunching across salt does not necessarily mean conditions there are safer. There's actually been some lawsuits that we've seen over the last couple of years of people suing people for the amount of salt that they have out in front of their store because they actually slipped and fell on it because there was so much kind of piled up. So just because you see a lot of salt out in front of a store doesn't mean it's more safe. And because you don't see salt out in front of a store also does not mean that it's not safe. And we're going to talk about some of the practices that are being used that don't actually have rock, the hard, dry rock salt out on the street. But here's another quick video. This one is hot off the presses.
More isn't always better. More salt does not mean more melting. It takes only 1 teaspoon of road salt to permanently pollute 5 gallons of water. When melting ice, use about 1/3 of a 12-ounce coffee mug worth of salt for every 20 feet of a typical pathway. Once the salt has done its job, try to sweep it up and either reuse the salt or throw it away. More isn't always better.
Apply salt sparingly this winter to protect the quality of rivers and streams in Illinois.
So yeah, this PSA is something that was put together by the city of Edina up in Minnesota. And they were very gracious to share it with us to be able to use down here in Illinois. They obviously get a whole lot more snow up there, and they've actually been, Minnesota as a whole has been a leader on looking at ways to reduce salt and again, looking at the costs of salt and what it's doing to the environment. So we're very happy to be able to share that PSA, and we're going to be making it more widely available to communities across the region. And again, I had mentioned earlier about the impacts of chlorides for pets, and this is can be a really important thing to do to clean your pet's feet, your dog's feet, when you come back in after a walk, and make sure that there isn't pieces of salt stuck between their toe pads. You definitely see a lot more cracking of the pads during the winter. They get really dried out and irritated. And then pets, a lot of times dogs will lick their paws, and that ingestion can definitely cause issues, and they can get sick from that. So that's another reason to be really cautious about the amount of salt. If you have a dog, the amount of salt that you're using, on your own surfaces, but also as you're taking them for walks around the neighborhood. So definitely a message out there to the pet owners to wipe the dog's feet when you guys get back. And then, kind of looking at that community aspect of thing and about being a good neighbor. It's pretty standard practice if you have a fire hydrant anywhere, on your property or across the street from your property, you make sure that gets shoveled, the snow shoveled out from in front of it, so that, if there was an emergency in your neighborhood, that the fire department would easily be able to find those hydrants and get to them. Shoveling snow from sidewalks in the vast majority of communities, you are actually required to clear snow on the sidewalks that are on your property. And if you live on the corner, clearing the crosswalk corner sections of the sidewalk, getting down to the street, through the curb cut. And then also I have not found a community yet that allows for shoveling the snow off of your driveway and pushing it out into the street. It is illegal, and everywhere where I have looked to try to find information on this, I have found that it is illegal to push your snow out into the roadway. It is inevitable when the plows come by that the snow gets pushed into your driveway. There's really no way around it. As the plow driver is going on, they can't pick up the blade or clear things off the end of your driveway. They would never get through their routes if they had to do that. It's not feasible. But when the road is cleared and then you push your snow, or either way, at any point, pushing your snow out into the roadway can create hazardous conditions for those driving through your neighborhood, especially if the road's already been cleared and you push snow out there. It can cause icy patches on the road and really create some dangerous conditions. So, when you're out there clearing your driveway, as challenging as that is and frustrating, when you've just cleared your driveway and now snow gets pushed back in, you can't put your snow out into the roadway. Some of the recommendations that I've seen from others is that particularly when you're shoveling your own driveway, you're standing in your driveway and you're facing the street, that to push as much of your snow to the right side of your driveway so that when the plow comes past, that it's not catching that snow and pushing it back into your driveway. That helps some. It's not going to eliminate snow getting pushed back into your driveway. But never push it out into the roadway, clear out in front of the hydrants, and keep your sidewalks clear for people walking through the neighborhood. So kind of moving on from the things that you can do at home and being responsible around your own property, we're going to move and kind of talk about being a conscientious commuter. As we've gotten better at clearing roads, and like I said, those expectations keep increasing, and people are have that expectation of being able to get to where they need to go or want to go at any time, and that they shouldn't be slowed down. Well, the reality is when it's snowing out there, you do need to slow down. You need to build in time, and so those are some of the things. We just put together this new poster that we could share with folks. Just really trying to point out different things about being both cautious, conscientious, and courtesy commuter out there on the roads. Kind of starting out is can you wait? Do you really need to get out while the storm itself is raging? Can you work from home today, which many of us are doing these days anyway? So maybe that option's going to become easier going into winters, even into the future. Or can you wait and go in a little bit later so that you're not out there in the middle of the storm? Can you put off that trip to the store until a little bit later? Or again, kind of in that idea of being a little proactive, if there's a storm that is potentially coming, and maybe get a trip into the grocery store ahead of time, things like that. So, if you have the option to sit at home and watch the plows go by, maybe that's the better option. If you really have to go out, be prepared. Definitely build in some extra time so that you can arrive to your destination safely. Think about things that maybe you should be keeping in your car over the winter. Obviously jumper cables are something you should probably have in your car all the time, but do you have some extra gloves and hat or a blanket or an extra jacket, in case you did get stuck somewhere, that you're able to stay warm. Having a charger in the car for your phone, making sure that you're able to keep those things up. So, really kind of think ahead a little bit and be prepared if you do need to get out. And then getting out on the roads, definitely need to slow down. And kind of like say when there's snow, you go slow. This is going to help you keep control of your car better. Give yourself greater distances between vehicles. And one thing which I hadn't really thought about, but here on the highway, like not to use cruise control, which I guess I've never really tried using it during a snowstorm, but they really recommend against it because you don't have as much control of your speed, and it may be easier to lose that control or traction on icy roads. And then one of the biggest things is just stay back from the plows. We've talked to public works folks, and it's really crazy when people try to pass a plow. The roads behind the plow are going to be clearer and safer than the road out in front of the plow. So you should never pass a plow on the road, especially on the right side, because a lot of plows, especially on bigger roads, they'll have a side plow on that right side, and the plow driver can't see you when you're coming up on that side. We've had complaints that I've heard of complaints to particularly at sort of the county level where they're working on some of like the 3-lane roads, and they'll work in tandem. So they'll have 3 plows all kind of staggered, and they can clear the whole roadway all in one pass that way, which is much more efficient for them and create safer roads. And, they actually getting people calling and complaining because they're taking up the whole roadway and they can't get past them. Again, it's kind of crazy to try to get around a plow like that when the road behind the plow is going to be much safer than the road out in front of the plow. And then once you arrive, think about wearing appropriate footwear while you're out in the winter, and think about how you're walking, and slow, smaller steps. There is definitely a big part of responsibility on your own part to be careful as you're walking through parking lots or up to stores, and kind of survey what's in front of you so you know what to expect. Don't try to carry lots of things while you're walking out and across places that potentially could be slippery because your hands aren't free to catch you if you're slipped. So really think about. This was a cute poster that we found from Argonne about walking like a penguin. So, again, we're always looking for sort of fun ways to get points across, and I think they did a really nice job with this one. So we've kind of hit on things you can do at home and things that you can do while you're out and a driver out on the street. But then maybe, kind of wondering what your communities are doing. And I couldn't really go through every community in DuPage County, but you can definitely reach out to your community to find out the practices that they're implementing. We have had a very strong interest and in expanding knowledge and practices on better ways to reduce the amount of salt. The DuPage River Salt Creek Work Group that operates across DuPage County has been a real leader in this. They've been holding annual trainings, I think since about 2007. They get great turnout to these workshops. We ended up holding them virtually this year, which we still got, we actually got more people to the trainings this year because they were held virtually. So that was great, but there is a lot of participation across the county. Every community should have a snow and ice plan. Many of them have them listed on their or posted on their website if you go and look for them. But that snow and ice plan really helps to guide decision-making throughout a storm event. Something that I found out really early on as I started talking with more and more public works directors is just how complex snow fighting is, and making the roads clear, because every storm event is different. What the pavement temperature is doing, is that temperature going up? Is it going down? Is it starting as rain and turning into sleet and then turning into snow? Is it light fluffy snow? Is it heavy, wet snow? There are events that they have to go out, even though we didn't get snow, but it froze out. There was some level of moisture in the air, and froze overnight, and so you have this film of ice on the road, so they still have potentially have to go out and address it. So these issues, it's very challenging, and the people who work in the public works department, the snow plow drivers, the people working in the in the garages, keeping all the equipment up and running. They put a lot of time and effort in during these snow events, and in many communities, they're pulling in anybody who has the experience and training to be able to drive these trucks, and they may be out there for a 12 or 16-hour shift clearing roads, and then they still got to go home and take care of their own driveways and things like that. So really be the idea of being courteous to those plow drivers out there and stay out of their way and let them do their job. Communities are investing in new and better equipment all the time. There's just a certain life cycle to trucks and things like that. And as communities are, needing to replace trucks, they're definitely looking for equipment that can help them save on the amount of salt that they're putting down. And a big area where you as residents in your community is to really help to support new initiatives to keep roads safe while we're using less salt. Complaints from residents drive a lot of decisions in a community, and politics unfortunately get into these conversations as well. I had a community that was doing a presentation for us and showing how they had been implementing practices, and you were using less and less salt every year, and then there was a big spike one year, and then it came back down. And asked the guy, well, why did that spike? What was up with that spike? Was that because that winter didn't seem any different than, or particularly bad compared to other winters? And he flat out said that was an election year, and the mayor just wanted to put more salt out. So unfortunately, politics get into some of these decisions, and it really kind of ties back to complaints. And I'm not saying that if there are unsafe conditions that you should definitely contact your community, but as just because things look different in a year, and I'm going to show you some of the different practices, it isn't because they're not wanting to keep people safe. They're actually implementing practices that allow them to keep roads safe, and in some cases actually safer than it was using dry salt to begin with. So the more we can do to support these initiatives, the better it'll be for our rivers and streams. So some of the things communities are doing is using brine, so that mixture of salt and water, and sometimes adding in different carbohydrates. You've heard of beet juice out there. It's what they want is a carbohydrate, a sugar to mix with the salt, because that helps to reduce the temperature at which the brine works. Beet juice itself does not melt ice. Sometimes you hear that communities are using beet juice to melt the ice. It's not the beet juice itself that melts the ice. It's including it in that mixture that helps the brine work better. And so some communities are purchasing it. Some communities are actually making it themselves. So storing it, covering salt storage is actually required now. So many communities have been putting in salt dorms or other structures to keep rainwater essentially off of salt. And then something, so where that brine is really it's being used in a couple different ways. One of the ways is first pre-wetting the salt. So putting that brine mixture on the dry salt, because salt actually needs to be in solution before it can melt the ice. So it either has to pull that moisture from the air, which, as we all know, it's very dry during the winter time. So it takes longer to pull that moisture from the air before the salt can start working. But if you pre-wet the salt first and then put it out, it actually starts working as soon as it hits the ground. It also gives it a little bit of tackiness, so it's not bouncing off of the road and into the gutter. It's really staying more where you want it, in the middle of the road. The other area that communities are using that brine is in what's called anti-icing. So when you see those stripes on the road, these stripes can be put out, again, acting proactively. They can be put out well ahead of a storm. Some communities will, kind of watch the weather, and a couple days before the storm, they'll go out and put this brine mixture down. Some communities will put it down like on a weekly basis, particularly in areas like on bridge decks or hills that come down to stop signs and intersections, as a preemptive strike kind of on salt or on ice forming. That's what that brine does. So even as it dries into the pavement, when you do get a storm event, it does not allow the ice. So ice may form above it, the snow will fall above it, but it doesn't allow that ice to bond to the pavement. So when you do come through with a plow or a shovel, it's going to be much easier to keep or to get that off of the roadway. And in many cases, when you have a light snowstorm, so maybe you get that powdery snow that's less than an inch, in many cases where you've put the brine down ahead of time, and these anti-icing, that will actually just melt that snow off. And in many cases, it doesn't even require the plow to come out. So these are some great practices that many communities are expanding or implementing within their communities, both on the roadways. I have some pictures here around a metro station. Even private de-icing companies are starting to use anti-icing to go around. And this is where I was saying, like, you may see this in places. I know a couple of park districts use this, some communities. And you can put the liquid brine down in front of a building on sidewalks and not have that dry salt there. But this is actually keeping you just as safe, if not safer, than having the dry salt on the sidewalk ahead of a storm. I have another question here. If there's a safe substitute for keeping dogs safe. I am not aware of one. I've seen many that are sold that are supposedly safe for pets, and I think really probably what it gets to is the shape of them, because a lot of them that I've seen that have been geared towards being safer for your pets are those white pellets that are very smooth, and I think that they may just not stick in between the pads as much as like the kind of more traditional rock salt. But product-wise, anything that has any of the chlorides in it, sodium chloride, magnesium chloride, calcium chloride, all of those things are going to be irritating to a pet's paws.
Jennifer?
Yes.
There's also another question that was in chat related to a good recommendation. It says, which brands are best for the below 15-degree weather? And they asked about the pets too, but they asked about what would be best for below 15-degree weather.
Yeah. I can't necessarily give you a brand off of hand, but usually right on the packaging, they will talk about, what temperatures, that the product will be good for. And so, really it's having something that works for under 15 degrees is what you want to look for. And it will be a product that's either going to have, more than likely will have a small amount of calcium chloride or magnesium chloride. Those are kind of the two most common ones that help to reduce the amount of, or that melting temperature. And then a lot of those, they actually are sold as kind of pre-wet salt. So a lot of the salt that you see that's colored, you'll see it purple or blue. Those colored salts, so even though you wouldn't necessarily notice it, it's not like dripping wet, but they do have some moisture already in the mix so that they will start working very quickly. But again, as far as like what's best for pets, it's really minimizing what you have on your own property and cleaning their paws when they come home is probably the best thing that you can do. I know for most dogs, booties are really not an option. I've never been able to keep them on my dog for very long. But if that's an option that works for you, I've seen they've definitely come a long way, but that would be another option for keeping pets' feet safe. How to safely dispose of salt that's left over if you don't want to store it. I don't know of any places around here that will actually take it. I know that's something that I think there's some communities have been experimenting with up in Wisconsin and Minnesota of actually collecting excess salt that people have at the end of the season so that it isn't dumped. But other, I mean, the only thing I can say would be to, put it in a bag and dispose of it in your trash. Not the best option, but if it's salt that you can't keep, for over the winter, it's not, I don't know of any other way to dispose of it other than in the trash. And yeah, I say there's another comment in the chat that has heard that, like olive oil has helped to keep pets' paws from getting too dry. So yeah, I'm sure there are definitely products to help alleviate the dryness during the winter, and protect against that salt burn. Let's see, keep up on any other questions here. I think okay, so is there a residential brine solution either sold in stores or a recipe online? So there are, and this is something that we were just talking about yesterday internally here about trying to put together. So it's on our list of things putting together potentially a video for or some guidelines. There are some things on YouTube to show you how to make a brine. It really, relatively speaking, is very straightforward. It's like I think it's 23.3 or 23.6% salt solution is what you're shooting for. And then that solution can be put into a pump sprayer. So like what you would use in your garden. And then the key with it, just like when you see on the roads, is the stripes. You don't want to use a fan and like wet your whole sidewalk or driveway. You want the stripes because when you put the stripes down like that, they will expand. They don't necessarily join, but this is what's really been found to be most effective. So that's definitely something we're working on, trying to put some information together. But I know there are some things on YouTube if you search up making a brine. So it is something that the more and more people are experimenting with at the residential level. All right, so almost done here. So again, I mentioned that in the communities have snow and ice plans. One of the things that's in those plans is the order in which they do snow clearing. Obviously they can't get to everywhere all at the same time, and they need to prioritize, especially when there's a bad storm. And so the first places that they're going to be out plowing, I mean, this is pretty standard across most communities. But the higher volume, the bigger roads are going to get plowed first. The roads getting to hospitals, fire departments, police stations, schools, kind of those areas that people really need to get to. Those are the places that are going to get cleared first. And a community will have a plan that would identify, where those places are within their own community. And then they move into kind of the next level of kind of those arterial secondary roads. Then they're getting into neighborhoods. And cul-de-sacs are usually the last place to get plowed because they take a lot of time. And depending on the community, there may be a lot of them. I know Carroll Stream has 400 and some odd cul-de-sacs. They actually were looking at, even and different communities have been investigating, like, do we actually need to put salt down in a cul-de-sac? Mostly because of most cul-de-sacs are short, and as cars are pulling in, they're bringing salt on their tires and into those cul-de-sacs. And so do we actually need to put salt down? Plus, because they're very short, I mean, it's kind of almost an extension of your driveway, like people are driving very slow on those. And, like and even if you have to drive even a little slower than maybe you normally do on your cul-de-sac, they're short, and that is not going to add necessarily time onto your commute. That's not what's adding time onto your commute. But yeah, just the way traffic patterns move, salt is dragged into those places. And then after the storm is over, that's when the crews go back and they'll push snow off of shoulders or in kind of turn lanes and things like that. So there is an order that they go through. Like I said, it is a very complex system. So it definitely give a lot of kudos to the folks who work in public works, because their job clearing snow in the winter is a big one. So as we talk about all this, really how much do, the actions that I do at home, like how much do they matter? And I'll be the first to admit, the salt that people put on their driveways is a drop in the bucket compared to what's put down on roads and parking lots. But like the video said, a teaspoon of salt impacts, pollutes 5 gallons of water. So every pound of salt matters. Every, bit less that we can put down will have a cumulative impact. So what you do at home really is important, and it is a way, for you to do your own part. Other actions like staying at home, letting the plow drivers do their job out there with fewer cars on the road is going to make that job easier. Supporting your community's use of less salt through, better practices, through new equipment, practices like anti-icing and pre-wetting salt, and that goes a long way. Some of the biggest pushback that we get is not from the public works folks, but from kind of people higher up who are receiving phone calls complaining about the things that they're doing. So, we really we're trying to address this issue from all sides, helping to educate residents and consumers, and helping, understand the process, support the process, be responsible on, the things that you can be responsible for, as well as working on getting better training for public works staff and working with decision makers within communities to adopt these practices. And, like I said, if there are issues that are truly safety issues out there, you should have conversations with your public works folks. But let them be conversations. Find out, is this something that just got missed? Is this an issue that they're aware of and are trying to figure out how to deal with? Like, make it a conversation versus just calling and complaining because you don't think there's enough salt out on the road or on a sidewalk or things like that. Because, this has been there's no one quick answer to this issue. It's really going to take all of us being more understanding and having those open conversations about issues that you see in your community and figuring out, what's going on and how those issues can be addressed. And I think that, public works staff would much rather have a conversation versus an argument, and maybe we can get things really addressed in a way that's safe and better for the environment long term. So I kind of had a similar slide with the last webinar that I did earlier in October on leaves. We have been working on outreach materials to share with communities for social media. We have blog posts. We have the one poster I showed. We have a couple other posters and bookmarks. We have a lot of resources to share. And whether you're sharing, these with your community, if you have a Facebook group or Nextdoor group for your own community, I picked out kind of some of the ones that would be applicable to use in that way. A lot of these can be found at saltsmart.org. If you pick on the public works option and scroll down, you can actually download these. You can contact me. We're happy to share them with you, or direct your community to this website for materials that are available. Definitely always looking for ways to get the word out. So the second video that I showed is one that we just finished editing and are going to be distributing that out to communities to use as well. So any way that you can help out with spreading the knowledge you gain as you participate in these webinars is definitely appreciated. So again, I'd like to thank DuPage County in supporting the webinars series that we're doing with them around different ways to protect water quality in DuPage County. And like Jan said, we're taking a month or December. We just have, I think, just the first 2 weeks in December of webinars. And then the next county webinar will be the third week of January. So I think we got through the questions that people have put in the chat and then the Q&A. My contact information is there if you have any questions or would like any of the materials that I've presented. So feel free to reach out.
Jennifer, a question just came in. It said, what happens to salt if it's not swept up? Doesn't it stay for the next time it's needed? Or is the thought that it will be shoveled up and put on grass or animal paws?
Yeah, I think pretty much that second thought. So if you have salt that's on the ground and then it snows and now you come and shovel it, yeah, that salt is wasted at that point in time. And yes, it is available as pets are walking by or things like that. So that would be the reasoning for sweeping it up and then putting it out for the next storm.
Okay, doesn't look like there's any questions. We're a little over on time, so I want to respect everyone's time and also let you know that this video will be available on our YouTube channel, the Conservation Foundation, and also DuPage County Stormwater will be sending this out to all the participants so you can view it at your leisure again. Oh, I do see one more question just came in. Oh, it says thank you. Oh, thank you.
Yep.
So thank you everyone for watching, and thank you, Jennifer, for presenting this great information. And I can attest to what Jennifer says. I've spoken to the gentleman at Naperville Public Works, and he said at times they've been like 3 abreast and people tried to pass in between the trucks when they're trying to do that, which is dangerous for them and for everyone on the road. So good luck. We don't have anything bad winter like we usually have had in the past. So maybe it'll be a nice winter, not too much salt. So thank you, Jennifer, and thank you to DuPage County Stormwater Manager for sponsoring this webinar. And I'll be ending it now. So have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Happy holidays.